What's up guys, I'm Nathan and in this video I'll be showing you guys the updated anime adventures tier list for the part 2 of the Jujutsu Kaisen update. So S tier is gonna be for characters which, let's say, have over 4000 damage per second at level 80. Not 80, at level 100. A tier is gonna be for characters that are very good but below that threshold. B tier is gonna be for characters that are very good for beginners. C tier is going to be for characters that are okay for beginners, and D tier is going to be characters bad even for beginners. The first character we have is GETO Maximum. This is actually one of the new secret units that we received, who has very good DPS. It's going to be lesser than, or actually it's going to be pretty similar to Urza Lightning with lesser range, reasonably good AoE, and he also hits air, so he's an alternative for Urza Lightning. Then we have Itadori, or rather Sukuna, who's also going to be a very solid S tier. This is because he actually has a special ability called Dismember, and basically this makes enemies take 20% more damage until they die. At least I'm pretty sure that's how it's supposed to work. And it's got, I think, a 20% chance of this effect happening. Additionally, he's got very good DPS actually, that's around 6000, with pretty good AoE and bleed. So overall a pretty good character. Then we have YUTA, Cursed Child. Now this is one of the highest DPS characters in the game. Well, sort of. I mean, it's around 8500 DPS, which is insanely high. He does not have a particularly good AoE. He's got 55 range, but the reason why he has high DPS is because you can only place down 3 of him, which is a pretty big disadvantage, so he's going to be lower on S tier. Then we have Lelouch, who's going to be in A tier. He's a summoner. He summons soldiers that actually also shoot, but yeah, definitely not on par with the S tier characters, especially since summoners are essentially single target. He also summons a mech, and his one ability, mind control, is pretty decent. Then we have Ace, who has Burn, the secret unit that was obtained during the Marineford update. Then we have Luffy Marineford, who's pretty bad. Then we have Future Gohan, who will be low down on A tier. This is because, okay, I mean, he's not particularly good, but he does have a reasonable DPS of 1900 with around 27 range and good AoE. Then we have Eren, who is pretty bad because he is a summoner unit. He does summon the attack titan, who actually attacks the enemies before running into them. Then we have Genos, who attacks fairly fast. We've got Sanji, who has a really cheap initial cost. Then we have Piccolo, who has good range. We've got Levi, who is able to crit and deal decent amounts of damage. So I'll go ahead and put him right about there. Then we have Speedwagon, who's going to be right here because he is going to be a money unit, which is obviously really helpful. Then we have Akinu, who will be a pretty solid A tier. Now he doesn't have the best damage per second, it's only like 2000, but he's got 50 range with good AoE as well as Burn. So definitely a pretty good character, especially against ice mages, which are seen in the Fairy Tail map. Then we have Crocodile, who has pretty decent AoE for an epic. Then we have well, I'm still sick, but yeah, we have Giorno, who's alright, but definitely not the best. Then we have Zenitsu, who will be right about there. We have Gaara, who will be a bit higher because he actually can stun. We've got Trafalgar Law, who will be right here. We've got Owen, who is of course going to be a pretty solid S tier. That's mainly going to be because he can buff all your units by 25%, and that is very helpful as a support. Then we have Whitebeard, who is able to push the enemies back with his ability. He's also got a pretty solid DPS of 3100 but low range, and you can only place 3 of him. Then we have Kento Nanami, who is still an amazing character. We got him last update, and basically his initial DPS, nothing crazy, it's gonna be around 4600, but he gains 1% damage every single wave. This means that in 100 waves of at least getting him to the upgrade where he increases damage, in 100 waves, which is definitely very doable, especially in Namek, he will be doubling his damage, and you can get it 300, 400 waves in Namek. Okay, I'm not sure about 400, but I've definitely seen quite a few people get to 300 in Namek. So yeah, he can definitely be really good. Then we have Blackbeard, who's going to be able to curse the enemies. It's kind of Irvin, but worse because it's not a permanent effect. He has to apply it, and it's also a slightly lesser damage buff. Then we have Kite, who's going to be probably over here. This is because Kite does have a decently good DPS. It's just that he's not consistent. His attack mechanics keep changing, and two of them have fairly small AoE, and only one of them is really good. Then we have Goku Black. Then we've got Natsu over here, who is definitely a very solid unit. Natsu has an extremely high DPS, and he also is going to be that's around 6,000, including the fact that he burns, and that's obviously going to be extremely helpful against those ice mages. Then we have Mihawk, who's got decent range but bad AoE. We've got Gildarts, who's got full AoE with a pretty solid DPS of around 1,000, yeah, 5,000. And he also breaks shields very easily because of the way he attacks. Then we have Sakura, who will be right there. She buffs your units by 10%. Then we have Goku Black, I mean not Goku Black, Goku Blue. Then we have Josuke, who's going to be right here because he does actually stun the enemies. Then we've got All Might, who is like a better version of Whitebeard. Now after his buff on DPS, he actually has a surprisingly good DPS of 3,800, which honestly isn't even that outdated anymore. With around 25 range, very good AoE and knockback. Then we have Coyote Stark, who is going to be barely hanging on to S tier. Because he does summon his exploding wolves that essentially do 1/3 of his damage, but still his DPS is only 4,666. Now he still does have a good AoE, which is why and range mostly, which is why I'm gonna leave him in S tier, kinda next to YUTA, because they're sort of similar in a way, but YUTA does you can only place 3 of him, but he has way higher DPS. Then we have this dude, Frieza, who's going to be right there because he's got good AoE. Then we have Ulquiorra, who's going to be barely hanging on to S tier as well. He's got around 4,500 DPS with 42 range and good AoE. So he's slightly worse than Coyote Stark, but after his buff, he's definitely a pretty solid unit. Then we have Todoroki, who's going to be right there, I would say, because he is a support. He's going to be able to slow down the enemies, which can be helpful. Then we have this dude, Broly. Broly now does not really have the best DPS. It's only 1,400, but he's got 48 range with full AoE and also hits air, meaning he's definitely not terrible. Though I would say All Might is better. Then we have Killua, who's going to be right about there. Then we have Miruim, who's going to be barely hanging on to S tier. The thing is, he doesn't really have a very high DPS, at least compared to some of the new units, but it is above 4,000, it's 4,400, and he also does hit air. He's got around 33 range with decent AoE. Then we've got Gon, who has full AoE, but isn't, I would say, S tier anymore. I'm gonna go ahead and put him in just A tier because he's only got around 2,500 DPS. Now he does have 52 range and full AoE, but I'm not gonna go ahead and put him in S tier. Then we have this character, Megumi. He's here as a support. Then we have Madara, who is kind of outdated, to be fair. Like he was buffed, if I'm right. He does have 2,100 DPS and he also burns, but yeah, it's still not great. So I'll go ahead and put him right about there. I would say he's probably better than Levi now, just because he does have better AoE. Then we have Bulma, money unit, of course, gonna be high. Then we have Shanks, who you guys actually voted for me to put down. So unfortunately Shanks is gonna be just about here. He does have the ability of time stopping, so I mean it's still pretty decent. Then we have Luffy, who's just bad. Urza Valkyrie, who's got a really high DPS. The thing is, Urza Valkyrie's damage is maybe a bit lesser actually than Urza Trueheart, but when you factor in the crit, well, she's instantly doing a similar damage to Urza Trueheart. That's around 7,200. Then we have Urza Lightning, who is like a slightly worse, I think. I might be wrong on this, guys, but probably a slightly worse version of GETO. At least from what I'm seeing already, GETO is a bit better than Urza Lightning. Then we have Nobara, who's definitely a pretty good legendary for you guys to get. She's got a pretty solid DPS, I would say. At least for a legendary, it's around 1000 DPS, which is pretty similar to Ace, but it's a bit lesser actually. And then you have Uryu, who is gonna also be an air unit who's capable of doing crit. So I'll go ahead and put him in a reasonable A tier. I would still say that Broly is better just because of the full AoE and the fact that he also hits air, but I mean they're both alright. Then we have Kisuke, who the mythical version at least is pretty mid. Then we have this dude who's gonna be right about here. Cell isn't as good as Urza Lightning or GETO, so I'll actually put him below Sukuna. Then we have Eisen, who honestly isn't terrible. His ability definitely does buy you quite a bit of extra time. It's just that it's essentially just a single use. But he's also got okay DPS, but you can only place 3 of him down. Then we have Overhaul. Then we've got Killua, who's actually really good. He's basically able to stun the enemies with an extremely fast SPA, so that's gonna put him in a pretty solid S tier. Urza Trueheart is gonna be definitely a very solid unit in S tier because she's able to bleed with an extremely high DPS. Then we have Netro, who's going to be right about here. Netro is definitely pretty good even now, but I don't think he qualifies. Actually no, he does qualify. He does like 4800 DPS, but you can only place down 3 of him, which is why I'm not gonna put him in S tier. Then we have Kisaru, who's gonna be right about here. We have Gojo, who's still, I would say, the best unit in the game for pretty obvious reasons. He's got a decent AoE, not particularly good, but 45 range with around 8100 DPS, which is around the highest in the game, I would say. He time stops the entire map for 8.5 seconds. He's got limitless upgrades if you at least have enough time to keep grinding those Rikugan eyes, and he deals double damage while his TS or time stop is actually very active. Then we have yeah, Diavolo is pretty bad. I'm gonna go and put him there. He's a support, but a pretty bad support. So yeah, he does essentially do what Gojo does, but way worse. Then we have Rengoku, who is pretty bad because this is the unevolved version, and honestly a lot of the legendaries are just better. Then we have Dio, who's gonna be moved down to A tier. He does automatically time stop, but it's no longer in the meta anymore. And then we have Armin, who is surprisingly decent actually. Armin does okay damage after his buff. Actually, he's got pretty decent damage. It's like actually wait, how much damage did Armin do? Yeah, like 1550. So I would say honestly he's like bottom A tier. Then we have Lucy, who's gonna be like really high up on A tier. She does summon 2 units at once, but it's just that more than 2 units cannot be on the field at the same time. But I mean, her summons do solid amounts of damage. They've got their own DPS and they have some HP. Then we have Kakashi, who is not that great because he's expensive and doesn't really do much. Then we have Karakuri, who is definitely going to be in the meta. He's going to be in S tier. He's going to be able to slow down the enemies, and that's of course going to be really helpful, so I'll move him up right there. Then we have Pain, who will be probably, I would say, just B tier. he pushes the enemies back, so he's like a Walmart All Might, I guess. Then we have Jotaro, who will be right here because he's like a Walmart Shanks. He also time stops. Then we have oh god, I'm dying. And then we have this dude, what's his face? Itachi, who is a Hail unit who has a Mitarasu burn. Then we have Darby, who's gonna be right there. He also has burn. Then we have Eren, Founding Titan, who has really high HP on his summons, but his summons take really long, which is why he's just not very viable in the meta. Then we have Naruto Beast Cloak, who is honestly not that great. I'll go ahead and put him in like low-ish A tier. Then we have the regular Naruto, who will be right there. Zeke, who's gonna be here because he actually has good range and is also a Hail unit. We have Jozu, who's like a worse version of Urza Trueheart. So I'm gonna put Jozu like maybe over here. Yeah, I think that should be fair for Jozu. Then we have Noro, who is alright. Then we have Toka, who I'll say is also in B tier. She definitely can be pretty decent. Then we have Totoro, who also burns. I would say it's a bit worse than Akinu, so I'll put him right there. But he does have a 2 times burn effect. Then we have Renzi, who is actually worse than Ace. Then we have Ito, who gains damage per kill, but it's a very small percentage, and you can only place down 3 Itos. I'll go ahead and put her in mid A tier. Then we have Kaneki, who is able to bleed, so I'll put him in B tier. Then we have Arima, who I would say is still going to be barely hanging on maybe S tier. No, he's got like 3550 DPS, so I'll actually go ahead and move him down to A tier. Then we have Akaza, who's alright. I'm gonna go ahead and put him right there. Then we have Rengoku, Ablaze, who is going to be in pretty high A tier, I would say. I'll just quickly check his DPS. Rengoku's DPS is 3600, and he's got very good AoE with burn, but yeah, it's not actually reaching the goal that we had set, but it's still very helpful against the ice mages, so it's a pretty solid character. Then we've got Akaza, who's able to self-buff himself, which is pretty good. Then we have Grimjow, who's going to be right there. He's got good DPS, but he kind of lacks AoE. Then we have Ichigo Hollow, who's not the best. Then we have this dude, who's kind of like future Gohan. He's going to be another leaderboard unit, but he's got full AoE but lesser DPS. Kisuke Bankai is going to be in a pretty solid S tier because he's capable of also buffing, just like Owen, and he has some DPS as well. But then we have Rukia, who's going to be right here because Rukia has full AoE with freeze. Hisoka is also going to be right there as a support. Then we have Pito, who I'll actually just put in like top A tier, I would say. She also has bleed, but I don't think her DPS fits. No, actually it does. 5000 DPS. So you know what, on a second thought, I'll go ahead and move Pito up to low-ish S tier just because of the bleed. Though Urza Trueheart is a lot better if you want the bleed effect. Then we have Gon, who's pretty good because he actually can be evolved into a mythic, so it's actually a good investment. Then we have Gray, who will be right there because he freezes, and and this freeze even affects air units, which is of course going to be really helpful. Then we have Juvia, who's actually, I would say, one of the highest DPS legendaries. We have Gajil, who's going to be right there. He has a bit better AoE but lesser DPS. Then we have Jelly or Jelal Heaven, who actually is pretty good. It's going to be Urza Lightning, actually going to be Cell but worse. So I'll actually go ahead and put him down maybe right there. He does still hit air, so I mean he's pretty good. Then we have Future Trunks, who's going to be right next to Gildarts, because I mean they kind of do the same thing. Then we have finally Toj, who is going to be like Hisoka, another stun unit. So that's pretty much it for this tier list. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. See you.